calls her a racist herself, and ESPN PR is losing viewers. Next, it's the sponsors. Here's a piece from something called The Deep State, which is a conservative media site. ESPN confirms its bias by keeping Jemele Hill and firing Curt Schilling. We'll talk about, his name will probably come up in a minute, but this is a very quick primer. Curt Schilling was a pitcher, pitched most notably for the Arizona Diamondbacks and the Boston Red Sox. He won 2 World Series. He is he's conservative. I think it's safe to call him conservative. He formerly worked. He was one of the analysts on ESPN's Sunday Night Baseball broadcast. He was let go by ESPN after a series of tweets and what I think people would call disparaging remarks about, among others, Hillary Clinton. In fact, I think one of his statements was something to the effect of that she should be buried under a building. I'm paraphrasing, but let's just say he wasn't terribly complimentary to the former First Lady. So he was let go, and there are people who have done the linkage that ESPN somehow kept Jemele Hill but fired him. Okay, so keep that in mind. ESPN initially issued a brief response saying that Hill's tweets, quote, do not represent the position of ESPN. Their statement added that Hill, quote, recognizes her actions were inappropriate. And there's the quote, there's the tweet from ESPN PR. However, while Hill did not immediately delete the tweet, White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders called the tweet a fireable offense at a press briefing. And I'm going to take a minute here to show you a video. I'm going to apologize in advance. There's a green strip down the left side, which you'll notice. This is where I got it from. Unfortunately, it's the best I could do.
A couple times today, you sort of emphasized diversity in the West Wing. You talked about the president being very clear after Charlottesville and denouncing all hate. I just wanted to read a comment from an influential African-American sportscaster from ESPN yesterday who said, Donald Trump is a white supremacist who has largely surrounded himself with other white supremacists. His rise is a direct result of white supremacy, period. He's unqualified and fit to be president. Why do you think, give a reaction to that? Is the president aware of that comment? And
I'm not sure if he's aware, but I think that's one of the more outrageous comments that anyone could make, and certainly something that I think is a fireable offense by ESPN.
If the president was so clear, as you said, why do you think influential African-American figures are saying things like
I'm not going to speak for that individual, but I know that the president has met, again, with people like Senator Scott, who are highly respected leaders in the African-American community. He's committed to working with them to bring the country together. I think that's where we need to be focused, not on outrageous statements like that one.
The president continue to do outreach?
Okay, there you have that. All right, however, ESPN did not fire Hill. By Wednesday, she issued a statement saying that she regretted that her comments and the way they were publicized, quote, painted ESPN in an unfair light. And there is the tweet from her account. Yes?
Can you clarify for us, just so we are on level ground, the context in which her statements were published and or if there is a difference in Curt Schilling's statements? What were the formats? How were they published?
Okay. This was all part of a Twitter storm, so to speak. And if I remember correctly, her tweets came in the context of a running conversation with viewers. She's very active on social media and very active on Twitter. She does not shrink from, the give and take.
She was criticizing Kid Rock, as I recall.
That's right.
what sort of started that.
That's
The
right.
context, was this on air time? Was this in the confines of her doing her job at that time? In the same with Schilling, I want to know, what were the confines of these comments? Because I think that helps establish a perspective.
Thank you for bringing that up, Professor Merritt. Yes, in the context, this context was on her own Twitter page, on her own time. This was not on air. As for Schilling's comments did not come on air as a commentator for ESPN. They came instead when he appeared on a talk show, on talk shows. And
As a
he-
representative.
as a representative.
or-
Well, I don't know that I don't know. I want to be as fair to the process as possible. I don't know that was coming on in a role as ESPN Sunday night commentator. I think it was just, I'm Kurt Schilling, I'm a conservative, and this is how I feel about, I just happen to have been a former baseball player. I happen to do this. I mean, I think that's the most fair reading of that. But that's an interesting, yes.
Yeah. I think the comparison between Hill and Schilling is a little bit disingenuous because Schilling had made multiple comments as a guest on talk shows and his Twitter account, and ESPN had asked him multiple times about Schill, and then he went and made a really disparaging comment about the North Carolina bathroom bill, and it was like, look, we've told you to knock it off, and you haven't. And so in a certain sense, he was fired for insubordination, not his tweeting per se. And so it was for multiple, whereas this was one incident by Hill.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, Dr. Carvin. Thank you for the context. Okay. So to continue on, the controversy, however, continues. Those people who are angered by Hill's tweets continue to demand that she be fired, claiming that her presence is proof of a liberal bias at ESPN. And you can see here are some tweets. Until they fired Jemele Hill for being a racist. Yeah, boycott ESPN until they fired Jemele Hill for being a racist. They fired Kurt Schilling for less, no justice, no ratings. ESPN. And this one's from Writing the Ship. Now, however, Hill's supporters maintain that she was well within her rights as a citizen to tweet what she did. They say that rather than firing Hill, ESPN should back her publicly. I have a link here to a column from Leonard Pitts, who's a columnist at the Miami Herald, who's won a Pulitzer Prize, in which he basically asks, what did she get wrong? Here's a tweet from Richard Deitch, who covers sports media for Sports Illustrated. And he notes that if you're a sports fan on Twitter, you might have already seen it. Over the last 72 hours, a number of prominent African-American sports journalists have changed their avatars to the face of Jemele Hill. It is, they say, their way of showing support for her and her First Amendment rights. And I have a video here. This video is from CNN's Reliable Sources on Sunday, which is a media show. If you're home on Sunday morning and you're interested in the concept of how the media covers itself, this is not a bad half hour. This is an hour, half hour, an hour now.
It's an hour.
An hour, okay.
11 to 12.
There you go. It's not a bad hour to watch. We'll take a look at this video. There wasn't. I thought there was a video.
Lowry, I want to zoom.
Whoops. Disconnect. There we go. This runs about 4 minutes.
Down a little bit and try to reframe what happened all week
you
long.
turn it up?
I'm gonna try.
There's two Americas. We know that. We know that there's kind of ongoing cultural war.
This is Wes
In one
Lowry,
America,
who's a reporter
Trump
for
is
the
racist.
Washington
That's
Post,
accepted. It's
who
believed.
who
In the
won a
other
Pulitzer
America,
Prize
saying he's a white
for
supremacist is
the
intolerable.
work that he did on
It's
police
unacceptable,
shootings.
and as Sarah Sanders said, it's a fireable offense. How do we get folks to talk with each other if there's such a divide between those two sides?
And it's difficult, and I'm not quite sure how you do that, but I think you're right. I think you've really kind of zeroed in on the heart of this issue, right? That this, too, part of America is a very mainstream political belief. The idea that the President of the United States and previously the Republican nominee for the presidency has done racist things, said racist things, has been elected on a wave of ideological white supremacy. This is not a controversial stance to half of the nation. To the other half of the nation, it's remarkably a controversial stance, right? And so it becomes this question of, is this an acceptable thing to say in a public dialogue or is this not? Beyond that, I mean, I think what's difficult here as well is when you, from a journalistic kind of ethics standpoint, when you employ someone to be a commentator, it becomes inconsistent or confusing to now discipline them or attempt to look like you're disciplining them for commentating on things, right?
You're saying she's employed to have opinions, and then she
her
said an
literal
opinion on
job,
Twitter.
right? That is what her job is to have opinions about things.
What about sports?
Well, about whatever. I mean, yes and no. I mean, I think ESPN has embraced all types of whether it be cultural coverage, whether it be at times political coverage. You know, and I think that we know now that, you know, journalists aren't people who only care about the one thing they write about or the one thing that they're employed to do. We all have diverse interests. We're human beings, right? And I think that at a time when sports are as political as they have ever been, when you're seeing major athletes from LeBron James and Dwayne Wade to the Colin Kaepernicks of the world, major sports storylines are about this president and this presidency. To have people who, again, are employed to be sports commentators and to handcuff them and not allow them to speak honestly about what they believe about what's happening seems inconsistent with what otherwise being asked of these very commentators.
My counter argument would be she can say a lot, but she works for ESPN. She should write a script. She should hand it over to her producers. They should talk about it ahead of time. It should be prepared and thought through, and then go on television and deliver that statement. But instead, she just tweeted something in the heat of a moment, fighting with people on Twitter.
Sure. Well, and I think that every newsroom grapples with this exact thing, right? We now have seized the means of production. We can pull our phone out and we can publish ourselves at any point in time, and it goes out with our names and the link to our organizations. That said, you know, when you look at ESPN's initial statements on this, I thought there was some inconsistency or some, you know, there's this idea that we don't want people to think she's speaking on behalf of ESPN. No one thinks Jemele Hill, when she sends a tweet in a back and forth with someone, is laying out the stance of ESPN, right?
Except that millions of people are running that on Fox News.
Sure.
Then it's MSESPN, meaning MSNBC, meaning that ESPN is hopelessly liberal.
Well, and it's part of the culture war, right? This, I think, so much of the controversy we've seen has absolutely nothing to do with the tweets that were sent, with Jemele Hill, with this
Do
conversation.
you think folks are trying to distract from Trump's issues with race, from DACA and other big news stories this week? I mean, the president tweeted about ESPN saying they should apologize for untruth. Made me wonder if he wanted this fight with ESPN.
You know, I think sometimes we perhaps overgame or give him too much credit, or people around him too much credit. I don't think Clay Travis was out here trying to influence what happens with DACA. I mean, I think Clay Travis was trying to get attention, which is what he does very well by picking these fights with ESPN, by driving a specific narrative, right? Displacing.
And again, he's associated with Fox Sports, so
He's
it's
right.
a rival of ESPN, a much smaller rival of ESPN. I think trying to get attention.
Of course. I mean, it is my read on that, and I think that's pretty obvious, right? That these are very often not even good faith engagements. Things are taken either out of context or unfair. Again, Jemele Hill, whether you agree with what she said or not, is a commentator for ESPN, stating a relatively mainstream political opinion. And so I think that the idea that this has even become a back and forth tells us something about where we are in our political dialogue. That again, we have half of the nation where multiple times a day they are thinking or saying, oh, Donald Trump is a racist. Or
And talking with each other about his racism.
Of course.
Okay. All right. So we'll continue.
Wesley Lowry, I want to zoom out a little bit and try to reframe what happened all week long here.
All right. Actually, this video comes up later.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I wanted to know, from your opinion, why are we putting the African American sports journalist under fire when she was in her rights? This is what I guess I'm just getting a little confused.
Well.
Wait, let me.
Okay. Okay.
She was in her right to have her opinion on her own platform, but she did something that we saw that she took to the same platform that Donald Trump uses to put out his opinions when calling Mexicans rapists and insinuating that Muslims are terrorists. She went on her own platform and did the same thing, but we want to fire her from her ESPN job when she didn't represent it at all. This was something in her opinion. Should we fire Trump for president for doing the same thing that he called a group of people something? That's what I'm getting.
I think the question is, when you work for someone, whether it's CBS or the Washington Post or ESPN, do you have a personal life? Have you made that choice that I work for ESPN, I represent ESPN, I am a public figure of ESPN, so regardless of whether or not it's on my own time or my personal Twitter, we've gotten to a stage where you know, she does represent ESPN, whether she wants to or not, if she's going to take that job.
So she should.
Can,
have her
hold on
can
one
I,
second.
can I,
Well,
here's
sorry.
what
I
I
want
want
to
to
do
do.
like I think he
Yeah.
wants to do an
Yeah,
overview
because I want to.
before
Yeah,
we
what I want. Yeah,
start in the
just,
back
I want to do a
and forth.
couple. First, I haven't even introduced the panel, so I want to do that first.
Okay.
I wanted to go through the overview and then get it because I know there's a lot to unpack here, and I want to do that first, and then I want to ask like a big question, and then we'll get to the heart of what you're asking, if that's okay. Hang with me now. Okay. So on my right, your left is Lissa Shepard. The list of places where she has worked as an instructor of media ethics is long and would take most of the rest of the hour. But I will tell you, in the immediate sense, she has accepted a position at the University of Arkansas, where she'll be visiting professor of, let me get this right, visiting distinguished professor of ethics in journalism for the School of Journalism and Strategic Media at the Fulbright College of Arts and Sciences at the University of Arkansas. And we can go through, and I want to, I hope is that okay that I shorten the intro?
Well, you could have said a few places.
Okay, well, all right, I'll give you a few places then, okay? She has taught media ethics at Georgetown, American, UNLV, the University of Texas at Austin. Okay, so
Welcome. What's her name again?
Lissa
It's
Shepard.
Alicia
Alicia.
Shepard
Thank
is
you.
my name, and then
Oh, so-
Lisa.
Lisa.
So what do you?
Alicia Shepard.
I mean, all my friends, and you guys can be my friends, call me Lisa.
Lisa.
Alicia, A-L-I-C-I-A,
I'm
is
sorry.
my professional name.
It's not like I say.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I think the other thing is I was the NPR ombudsman, so
Yes.
I dealt a lot with the ethics
Yes.
issues at NPR.
Yes, for 4 years. Also here, one of our own, Professor Dana Shelley. She teaches in the School of, the Department of Strategic Communication. And her list of credits is long. I can list them if you like.
Yes, I would like to hear them all.
Okay. I got them right here.
While we're doing that, does
Yes.
anyone know how to live stream? Because we're apparently not live streaming.
So you just open up Facebook page. Do you have a Facebook?
Are you doing
It's supposed to be on the
Facebook
Scottsdale
Live, or-
page, and it's not.
It's not, yeah.
You can only live stream. Well, you can live stream on Facebook.
You can do it on Facebook.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing, it on the Facebook page of this, but it's not showing up.
Okay.
All right.
Um,
Saved by
While we're
Woman.
doing that, Professor Shelley has worked for the Annie E. Casey Foundation. She's also worked with the Southern Poverty Law Center, with the Edelman Public Relations Firm. She has worked for, I'm going to go through them just.
That's,
It's enough? You want more?
that takes me back to that. That's good.
That's good. Okay.
Welcome,
All
Professor
right.
Shelton.
Very good. All right. All right. So now I want to ask. Now that we've introduced the panel, I want to ask what I think is the big question. How many of you agree with what Jemele Hill did? How many of you think that she was within her right to do what she did and should face no consequences for it?
Okay, that's multiple questions.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
That's a lot.
Let's start with the basic. How many think that she was right to do that? She was within her rights to do what she did.
Within her rights is a different question than
Okay,
what she writes.
that is true. Okay.
Yeah.
How many do you think she was right to do what she did?
How many
Much the same
don't
show-
think
yeah, how many
she was
don't?
right?
See, I don't have an opinion about that, right or wrong.
Okay. I don't. Yeah.
Who don't think she should have done what she did? Okay, we have 2, 3. Okay, a few more. Okay. You want to have a seat?
There's some seats over here.
Sit here. You're.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start with. Go back to Stephanie. Your sort of basic question. You're essentially asking, if I can boil it down to what you asked. How come Donald Trump can tweet and say what he does without any consequence, and she can, but she can't? Is that am I making that too simple? Does that make sense?
You gotta say that Jemele Hill is on the ESPN platform when President Trump is our president.
Can we hear
So
from
that's a higher, that's,
Okay.
that's at a higher.
Oh, I was just asking her question, sort of asking
You
to
did
rephrase.
it right, but you need to say, like, when you're, like, just phrasing the question, say that Jemele Hill, both of them were on their own platform, but Jemele Hill is supposedly when she writes that, supposed to be representing ESPN, and Trump is supposed to be representing the country as a whole, but he talks about the people here.
Okay.
So let's talk about that.
So I will ask the panel, because you both raised, when I asked if you agreed with what she did and thought that what she did was right, you both raised your hands in the negative. And if you would like to go first, why you feel that way. Why you feel
Sure.
that way.
The first thing is, and this is why it's important to, be clear about what the question is. Did she have the right to tweet whatever she wanted at any time on any place? Did she have the right? Yes. She had the right to do that. That's the First Amendment right. Yes. Was it the correct thing to do? I would say no. I would say no from the perspective of, and I'm speaking not as a journalist or anyone who's ever been a journalist, but someone who has represented organizations who have to think about how they are represented to their publics, right? So one of the clients I represented at Edelman was Nike, and I knew there was a sport connection in there someplace.
Yeah.
It didn't hear what
Yeah.
was like. Why is she talking? She's clearly not an athlete. Your job as an employee is to represent your organization, is to lift up your brand, is to support what your organization is trying to do. That is your part of your responsibility as a representative of your organization. Again, separate from, do you have the right to, right? I mean, understand, right? Correct? In this instance, and again, it's interesting having this conversation in 2017, this particular time, adds even more complexity and I would say confusion to this conversation. If the previous presidents had to turn over their personal devices so they couldn't even make phone calls, we're in a whole new landscape, okay? So I would say from, let's say, ESPN corporate, that was not the smart thing to do. If I'm Jemele Hill's brand advisor, I'm going to say, wow, that was a great thing to do because now you got tons of attention. Everyone's talking about you. Everyone's following you.
Yeah.
The answers about right or wrong, and in fact, I listed words: appropriate, legal, right, smart. It all, yes or no, depends on what your perspective is. Not what your opinion is, but where do you sit? I'll stop there.
That's fine.
That's
Lisa,
great. I think that's really helpful. I mean, some of you have probably studied that there is a Society of Professional Journalists Code of Ethics, which is very simple. It's report the truth, or seek the truth and report it, minimize harm, act independently, and be accountable. And so there is, and this is evolving, unfortunately, but it's always been for people like my age who've grown up as journalists that your job is not to sell your opinion. It's who cares what you think. It's your job to inform the public in a neutral, in many ways, not both sides, but all sides. So that, if you want to, you can't donate money to a candidate, you can't put a sign in your front lawn. You have made a decision as a journalist that you are going to represent the organization. If you don't want to work there, don't work there. Now, where Jemele Hill makes it a little more complicated is she a commentator? Is she paid to give her opinion? Or is she a journalist whose opinion shouldn't be made public? Then we can talk about the second thing is the limitations of Twitter. Had Jemele Hill written a column and explained why she thinks the way that she does and outlined it and linked it to Twitter, that would have been her personal opinion. She probably would have had to run it by ESPN. I think she's even said, I made the organization look bad and I apologize for that. I still believe what I tweeted. So she has been able to hold on to her opinion. Then the last thing I'll say is ESPN like any other news organization, is ultimately a business. And who watches, what is their job? Their job is to get an audience. There is an audience of Trump supporters who watch ESPN. So alienating Trump supporters is not what ESPN wants to do. And they have to be careful of that. And particularly right now, ESPN, as you probably know, their business is not doing well. You know, it's owned by ABC, but they're losing viewers. So she has to think about the wider audience, and that she does represent ESPN.
I just have one question as a follow-up question.
Okay.
So you're
Then we'll
talking
take
to
you.
a group of like millennials here that are going to emerge into our field one day.
Right.
Many of us here are journalism majors or MPPD majors. Are you saying once we tie our name to our brand, our opinions should be kept to ourselves? It shouldn't matter anymore. And are you also saying that, like, basically, when there's something wrong, just leave? Like, you just shouldn't say, because I feel like that when she recognized that, you know, she did keep her opinion, but she let it be known I was saying this as a human, not just as a journalist.
Right. I think that, as you just said, you're coming into a very different news world than one that I grew up in. And part of the problem with this is ESPN not having clear guidelines and wanting her to be controversial, but not too controversial, wanting her to have a personality, but not too much personality. So I think that what's going to be difficult and challenging for all of you is to figure out how to navigate in this world. And I'll say that Politico, for instance, their managing editor just said when they get job applicants and they think they're interested in them, they look at their Twitter accounts and they look for partisan viewpoints. And if they see that someone is so blatantly anti-Trump, they're not going to hire them either way. So, I just think you really have to think that there is absolutely no such thing as privacy. There's really not such a thing as personal and private anymore. I feel like once Facebook really blew up, that we all traded, our privacy for access to a wide amount of information.
Young lady, she had your hand.
Just to bounce off what she had been saying and the beginning conversation that I walked in on. I do feel as though she was wrong. I feel as though she was wrong for many reasons, one being that she works for ESPN. And the reason that her account is active through Twitter with a check mark next to it is because she hosts ESPN shows. So that means she represents them. So if you were to get on there and say what she had said about, Donald Trump, whether it may be true or her opinion or not, was it appropriate? As you stated, no, it wasn't. Because you don't know who watches ESPN. You don't know what people, may watch you and have a viewpoint on you, but watches it simply because of the content that you produce through ESPN. So it was wrong for her to get on there and say those things. However, if she wanted to say those things, there are many ways that she could have expressed her point without going on such a largely, basically she got on a pedestal and said what she wanted to say, and then she's now saying, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Yes, we are all human. That is fine. That's a fact. But is it appropriate to then go back and apologize for what you had said? No, because you already said it. You know what I mean? If you were sorry, you wouldn't have said it in the beginning. You would have thought about your actions. She meant what she said, but she did not want the negative feedback to be on her job rather than her.
I think
But
she
she
was
did it on her
sorry
own.
she didn't think about the consequences.
But here's the thing, though. I mean, she did it on her own personal page. She did not get on SC6. She didn't get on the 6 and say any of this. She said it on her own. I'm just playing devil's advocate. By the way, I'm doing my best here to be as neutral, But she did not say. She didn't get on at 6 o'clock or 6:15 and say, by the way, y'all, Donald Trump is a straight out white supremacist.
But she
said
did
it on
get
her
on
own.
her Twitter account. She would not have that check. That certified check means that she is a certified public, that she is a human, that she's a public, she's publicly known. So if you're publicly known, how are you publicly known? ESPN.
Well, what I did not do was a good job of telling you that she had a job. I mean, she had a life before she went to ESPN.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay. So hang on a second. She did not. I mean, here's the thing, though. She had a life before she came to ESPN. She worked in other places before she came to ESPN. So I'm not sure it's fair enough. It's fair to say that she wouldn't have a certified check if not for ESPN.
Okay, hold on one second. The certified check is you get the certified check by X number of followers, public recognizability. Let's remember also, in addition to ESPN, she's also the Undefeated. And so she's involved with that. Remember last semester we had a program here with the folks from the Undefeated. Jemele Hill was here. So she has an audience, in multiple spaces. Again, is it appropriate depends on from what perspective we're asking that question. And two apologies, if you do something that you believe is wrong, you apologize. There's no shame or ding on someone for apologizing. So with social media we can apologize. Unfortunately, we can't erase anything though.
Right.
But
I'm sorry, Dr. Carver has had his hand up for one
Two quick points. One is, I thought Jemele Hill was wrong in terms of she wasn't acting as a journalist. She said that Donald Trump was a white supremacist. Factually, he has said things that are supportive of white supremacists. He has reputed white supremacists working in his organization, in his administration. Had she said that, ESPN would have been in a different kind of position because she was reporting rather than her opinion. The second thing I want to address is the whole thing about the business.
Right.
There's a whole story that's going on now about how ESPN is losing viewers because it's become too political and too conservative. If you look at the kind of cutting the cord, people dropping as being subscribers to ESPN, the year from June 2015 to June 2016. And that June 2016 is an important point because that's when we saw more political-oriented shows on ESPN, and then following by Colin Kaepernick and so forth. There was more droppage of ESPN from 2015 to 2016 than there has been from 2016 to 2017. If it's politics that are driving viewers away, that doesn't seem to be the case. There's been fewer people that have been leaving. And then there was a J.D. Power study done of people watching football, whether or not they're not watching as much. And it turns out that the Kaepernick effect is about 3% of total viewers of ESPN. They've blown that up, and say, oh, it's as much as 30%. It's like, no, the 10% are watching less, and 30% of those are because of Kaepernick. So there's a whole kind of story that's going about how ESPN has become too political and it's hurting its brand, which is, quite frankly, overstated. But Jemele Hill is kind of caught in the middle of that with this kind of tweet. So.
Yeah, just that, as we go along and terminology gets introduced, I want to make sure everybody's familiar with when Dr. Carver talks about the Kaepernick effect, everybody knows what we're talking about, Colin Kaepernick, and so we all know who that is, right? So we don't have to do that. Okay, good.
we have a question over here.
Yes.
Oh, well, it wasn't so much a question as like a point. I don't really think it's a matter of right or wrong, because if she's just stating her opinion and we're just looking at her opinion with Donald Trump as a white supremacist, it's not really right or wrong. That's just her opinion. I think it's more of a matter of, was it the smart thing to do or was it the not smart thing to do? Because you're asking if her tweeting that was the smart thing to do. I don't think, I agree with what she said, but I don't think it was the smart thing to do, because of course people are going to say, oh, she's a representative of ESPN, even though she's not saying it on ESPN versus her own Twitter. You can see how people are going to put a negative narrative to that situation. So I think it's because when I hear people talking, they're saying, oh, it's wrong because it wasn't appropriate, and they're kind of bouncing back and forth. So I don't think it's a matter of right or wrong. I think it's just, was it the smart thing to do or was it not the smart thing to do?
We'll pick that apart. We'll pick that apart in a
I like
second.
that.
I mean, and then get Professor Jones in a second, but
I just wanted to, because I heard a couple notes about how it's a new media world today. And it definitely is. I think that because it's, 2017 and we're moving in and media is evolving and everything, I think that a lot of times nowadays opinions are stated freely. Opinions are stated more often than they were before, especially with political leaders, especially with people in power, especially with people that are well known. And I think that nowadays that's becoming more of a norm, but when someone says something that a large group of people don't like, then it becomes an issue. So let's say if she said something about Trey Songz, or she said something about Chris Brown or something like that, it probably wouldn't be as big. But because she said something about Donald Trump, and it's such a large group of people that care about him in a certain way, and it's because it's a sensitive topic, it became a bigger issue. So because, like you said, she was talking about Kid Rock before, he's not as big as Donald Trump is.
Right.
So I think that causes a big issue, as well as the time period as well, too. We can't necessarily think of it as how it was back then. We have to think about how it is now. Donald Trump can go on Twitter and say all these things about Muslims and deporting people, but back then you didn't really have presidents doing that on Twitter, on social media. Right. So I think that it's a new day and age, and people are feeling more comfortable speaking out, because we got Donald Trump saying that people are racist and nothing is being done about it. But
well,
so that I think that's a battle.
And this is why it's so important for people to be informed. And by people, I mean all of us. To go beyond, oh my gosh, I'm mad that someone said Jemele couldn't do this. You don't know what happened or why or context, and you're mad and you signed a petition. This is why, as future communicators, whether you're journalists, strategic communicators, you have to know and understand what's going on and why. And think about how all of this fits. As I said before, there's right, there's smart, there's appropriate, depending on perspective. Again, Jemele Hill's communications team is probably going to ride this all the way. She's going to get an Image Award next year from the NAACP. She will get an Image Award next year from the NAACP, and or be on the cover of Essence with the other Stay Woke sisters. I will bet you $25 she will end that Image Award. Hopefully, goodness, there are not too many people in the room because I have that many quarters. But so think about it. From a perspective, this was the best thing she could have ever done, because people are talking about Jemele Hill.
I never heard
who
of her
were never
before.
talking about Jemele Hill before.
And now I want to watch your show.
Now, what's unfortunate, there are people who aren't going to listen to her smart critique and intelligence about athletes, the business of sports, et cetera, because they've turned off because of what she said. You make, as a public figure, which in a way that's what she is. She's a journalist / public figure, and that's our new world too. You don't get to be, you're not necessarily one or the other, right? Thanks to both social media, the way everybody wants to do some kind of branding, this is the new space. So you've got to, the point is, everybody, we all have to think first.
Yeah.
Before we tweet, write, whatever. Do you have the right? Heck yes. You can tweet anything you want. The other thing is you also have the right to think about your tweet, think about your Facebook post, and then delete it. How many people have deleted a Facebook post or two? Okay, if you have not deleted a Facebook post, you need to go back and look at your Facebook post.
Dean Jones.
I guess I'm the curmudgeon in the room, so it's from an ethical perspective.
Oh, I thought I was the curmudgeon. I'm sorry.
Y'all can share.
We can take turns.
Okay.
And also bouncing off of what Dr. Carguff said, what is our responsibility as reporters? We talked about context, because what you see happening in a story like this is the gut reaction, as opposed to, is 30% really the number? Well, if it's 30% of 10%, well, that's a whole different number of people. And I think that a lot of viewers have a distorted image of, and you see this stuff repeated. It's like once the mistake is out there, somebody else picks it up because they don't check to see whether they assume that the first person vetted it before they reported it out. And so you've got all these numbers flying around about whether ESPN has more viewership or less viewership, how much of it's connected to Kaepernick, and people are tired of politics, and you can always find a quote or someone to say what you want to say in support of that, but is it the reality? And so what's the responsibility of journalists to make sure that context is given as part of their, especially in this kind of hurly-burly pace in which we report news.
So she said assume. Do you know what the joke is for assume for journalists? What does assume do? Makes an ass out of you and me.
Yeah.
So, and the other one is if your mother says she loves you, check it out.
Check it out.
And,
That's right.
And I think that, I reacted to this instantly, when they said, the White House said it was a fireable offense. I thought, yeah, it is. Believe me, if a reporter from the Washington Post did that, I think they would be fired immediately.
Really?
Yeah, I do.
Oh.
However, again, I'm going to put on the hat of spokesperson, communications person. It was not appropriate for the White House press secretary to call that a fire up, to say that a private citizen of a private company should be fired.
Right.
If that person worked for the Department of Defense or Homeland Security, Commerce, etc., the U.S. government, that would have been appropriate. That was entirely inappropriate.
Yes, I totally.
Rogers over here.
No.
Nice and loud.
Stand up.
Yeah,
Stand
there's
up,
other
nice and
seats
loud.
right here.
Yeah,
The deacon row
Dookies,
is
yeah.
available.
You Dookies can
What
speak
did you
up.
call it?
The deacon row in churches is broken.
Oh,
Yeah, well.
I thought you said the
I think,
beacon.
yes, I think she didn't pick a feasible option in the matter because regardless of whether she spoke up for her First Amendment, you still represent the brand of ESPN. Again, do I agree with her? What she said, yes, there are some, facts and notes that support that. But also the question or narrative you have to look at, is she good enough to get away with it? There's certain reporters that can get away with it because of their clout. Trent Dilfer, people probably don't remember, but with the Colin Kaepernick situation, he told him he's a backup quarterback. He's a backup quarterback at the time when Blaine Gabbert had surpassed him as a starting quarterback. He said he needs to sit down and shut up and mind his business, and we don't want to hear about all that. But the context and the way that he said it, and the fact that it was about football and the audience was focused on the football aspect, he was able to get away with that. So it's unfortunate for Jemele. I don't think she should get fired for it, but also I feel like you have to be kind of strategic when you say certain things like that.
Well, I would just say this. I would just say this, and as someone who covered sports media, wrote about it for a while for the Baltimore Sun, here's a sort of a truth. Kurt Schilling got replaced at ESPN. Yes, he had sort of violated policy a few times. But the fact of the matter is, ESPN made a corporate decision that he doesn't bring enough to the table for us to put up with his shenanigans. Now, what may be happening with Jemele Hill going forward is she may have sort of undercut her support to the point where something like this happens again, or more likely, if the 6 p.m. ratings fall, they'll say, who's next? Because she doesn't, she has perhaps cut her base of support, or at least her value. Yeah. And that really is, in a sense, we talked about the new media reality. The truth is that all of us, in a company, bring value to a company. And people will accept or tolerate, in some cases, what you do, depending upon how much value you bring to them. And if they found out today, if the ratings come out today and they find out that the numbers have doubled since last week, they may very well tell her, Jemele, why don't you come on? In fact, why don't you say what you said about, let's get the tweet. Why don't you end the show with that? Yes, sir.
I think Professor Shelley and Shepard, you all have addressed something that's really important, is very relevant. Number one, there's so many dynamics at play here, and all of these perspectives. We're talking about her. She could be anybody. She could be anybody, and this could be any medium. It could be any organization. It could be government. It could be media. I think that, again, we really need to look at the ground level, as you have established for us. What are the rules? What does the establishment say? What do they expect of those who are representing them? So that she can make an informed decision about how she wants to express her opinion or have her opinion. I don't think that opinions are more plentiful now It's just that the instancy, the microwave age that enables us to convey our messages and our thoughts so quickly, and they're so proliferated so easily now. I don't think it's any different now. Opinions have been around for forever, but we really do now. Our whoever we are, whatever millennial or X or Y or old age or whatever we are, really have to think about what are the ramifications of what we have to say. What are the implications? What's it going to do for us? What's it going to do for the establishment? What does it mean to the organization? You got to look at all of the things, all of the factors, whether we're right, whether we're wrong, whether
we're
ethical,
white.
Whether we're white, whether we're black.
And that too, because that always comes into play,
I
and
know.
we don't want to be honest about it. We still have to understand the America that we're in.
Just for, in terms of an ESPN guideline, which was, I think, put out 5 months ago, was you cannot talk about politics unless it relates to a sports issue. You know, like if Donald Trump had said something about Colin Kaepernick, then you could say it. But that, you know, again, how well they enforce their rules and make clear. I mean, some people could say, man, we never knew that, because news organizations have ethics codes, and then I'm always surprised that, you know, reporters haven't even seen them.
But Jemele, unlike the gentleman that we talked about who escaped, this is a first time.
Yeah.
If this becomes a characteristic pattern, then I think the reaction may be different from ESPN. I think this is going to be different.
How
That's just my
so?
opinion.
And
I
I'm
think
going to
it's
get to this
different.
gentleman after, but how this is going to be different? How so?
Again, if her team has said, "Oh yeah, we got great numbers," and perhaps, you know, her audience is growing, she may become more pronounced as a sports commentator or as a talent for ESPN. She may back away from being very political, but she has garnered an audience. If she creates a pattern that is bringing publicity that shuns audience or causes the audience to leave, then she may actually have the same consequences.
Yes, sir.
Just piggybacking off of what everybody else said, like basically, was Jemele Hill wrong? It wasn't. I don't think it was like a wrong or right in the situation. I mean, but it was it so popular? I don't believe so. I don't believe Twitter was the right place to go about it, because once you put something out there, it's out there. There's no taking that back. There's no
And
way
no
you can bring
explaining
that back.
it.
And then explaining it, but but was she allowed to have an opinion? I mean, yes. I mean, that's our First Amendment rights. I mean, like freedom of speech.
You know, that's interesting. I want to show you, in a couple of seconds, I'm going to show you an example of how, to use a phrase, sometimes the First Amendment right can go wrong. And I'll show you in a couple of seconds. We'll take a couple. Did you?
Yeah, I was just going to agree with him, because in this instance we are dealing with a Twitter platform that only has 150 characters. I think it should
140.
You get an extra 10.
You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
actually express why she felt that way, it wouldn't have been an issue.
Exactly.
But the fact that she took specific words, because you only got a certain amount of word count, which means
Right.
your word can only state a certain meaning, because you
Right.
can't use another synonym or another word to replace it. You can only take it as what you read
Yeah.
on Twitter.
No, that's so true. You can't explain yourself or defend yourself, and
Because after that, then you got direct replies, and everyone else comes to comment. You can't explain what you meant.
Right,
Yeah,
and
and-
after you call the President of the United States a white supremacist,
You should
and that's been
expect
retweeted 5,000 times, few people are reading your second and third and fourth tweet to clarify, here's what I meant by that.
Exactly.
And that's also on us in terms of how we consume what's going on out there.
Dr. Dorsey House?
Good afternoon, everyone. Only a quick comment. A young lady left the room, but she said to me the most compelling thing so far that triggered thought for me, which is, I see Jemele's actions as an act of leadership. It took a lot of courage, and the way we talk about leadership in my classes, you kind of see what needs to be done and you do it. And it may cause blowback professionally and in this ethical sphere of journalism, but it was an act of leadership from another perspective, perhaps in the liberation of black people. However, I wonder, this young lady said Donald Trump's been tweeting a whole bunch of stuff. So here we are talking about, from this black female voice, an authorized voice, both by a company called ESPN and by herself, about a fireable offense, and and not talking as much about an impeachable offense.
Well,
All right.
All right.
okay.
No, white supremacy is that's not part of the articles of. You can be a
Yeah.
white supremacist and not be impeached.
We've had other presidents who
We
were.
had that.
Yeah.
Woodrow Wilson, for
There's
example.
more to discuss there. The point is, where's our attention, right? It's more, where's our attention?
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I think systemically. She speaks on behalf of many and represents a whole crew. And it's from her voice, and who she this black female voice. How dare she?
Well,
Is what
and
I'm wondering about.
to some extent, ESPN, you could make the argument that ESPN is sort of playing footsie with this, in that she and how many of you, by the way, have watched the show we're talking about, SC6, or watched The Six? Okay. So if you watch the show, you know they've got an African American male, an African American female. The show is not, it's not, if you watch ESPN on a regular basis, you know that what you see at 6 o'clock is not what you see at 11 o'clock. It's not what you see in the middle of the night when they do updates. It's got, to use you all's term, it's got flavor, right? It's got flavor. The two of them are there for that specific reason. And ESPN, in a way, is sort of playing footsie with this, in that they've got these two there to draw a particular audience. And then it seems as though at the moment where they express their blackness, if you will, they get slapped on the hand, or she gets slapped on the hand. Now, you know, if in my honest moments, in my journalist moments, yeah, I don't think, you know, I'll step out of the neutral role here. I wouldn't have done what she did. I wouldn't have done it that way. I might have expressed. I have. Believe me, I walk around every day with feelings and thoughts. But there's an appropriate. Yeah. Sometimes I need a hug, but there are moments, you know. But I also recognize that keeping it real can go wrong. Here's an example. Let me show you a real quick example of that. On the screen, I have a copy. If I can take this off here. This is a piece from Jim Brady, who's a longtime friend of mine, who does for ESPN what Lisa did at NPR. He's an ombudsman. He's a public editor. And he wrote a column basically about this issue in which he took her to task. He's, in so many words, saying that she put ESPN in a bad light. Okay? So, if you'd like to go read it, go to their site and it's there. Now, here's what's interesting about that. Jim also is an entrepreneur. He owns and operates two local news sites, one in Philadelphia, one in Pittsburgh. The one in Pittsburgh is called The Incline. He is the boss. He owns and operates it. He fired a freelancer who works for The Incline, in part because the freelancer called him the dumbest person alive for the column that he wrote about Jemele Hill.
Did he say the dumbest person alive?
He says, you must be the dumbest person alive. I don't have the whole thing, but yeah, the dumbest person alive. He called, let me see if I can find the original tweet, but is deleting his stuff after, I'm sorry.
So that's what I was going to bring up, how you can't take things back. Even when you delete something on Twitter, somebody has kept it. I mean, even if Jemele Hill kept it, deleted her account, it's out there 1,000 different ways.
So basically what I'm saying to you is, and I've said this to my class, it's not to say this here, you know, there are things that I might think about, for instance, school policy, things that happen within, you know, that I might raise, you know, I might think to myself, well, why are we doing it this way? And I have every First Amendment right to share that with you, if I want to. But if my employers, Dean Jones, Dean Wickham, President Wilson, get wind of something that I say that may not necessarily run to that thought, I may be punished for that. Because sometimes keeping it real goes wrong. So you have to be aware. You say this not to censor you, but to keep the machinery going in your head about where you say what you say. You know, I don't. That's one of the reasons. I'll just share with you. One of the reasons that I don't read "Rate My Professor." Because if I did that, if I did that, a couple things would happen. And I'd like to believe, and I hope I know myself well enough to know that I would not take umbrage or go after somebody who criticized me. But the other part of it, though, is I feel like I have to operate in my own way. I have to teach a class the way I feel is appropriate until I'm told otherwise. And if I did that on a regular basis, if I relied on that, then I would probably change, and that wouldn't necessarily be helpful to the students. So you have to do, yes?
Yes, Professor Kane, you know I have something to say on this one.
I know you do.
In this instance, in your hypothetical statement, will rate my professor. Students take their time out to give you a rating, which, mind you, we all have to go through your ratings, right? Don't we have to submit some type of summary throughout at least Morgan saying how we felt about you as a teacher?
Right.
That's not rate my professor.
That's not rate my
I know,
professor.
that's
Yeah.
not rate my professor. I'm saying that is something we all generally have to do. Rate my professor is an extra thing that us students go and, like you say, keep it real.
Right.
But what if the students are given a vague, description on how they feel like you're teaching, and then you go and rate my professor, you question why a lot of students, I'm just saying in your hypothetical
That's
statement,
fine, no,
you
that's
question why
fine.
students don't want to sign up for your sports reporting class. Maybe I'll rate my professor, which, by the way, I check for every single teacher before I sign up for
Sure.
them. Due to the fact I trust my peers. I go to school with my peers. My peers, I already have interactions with these teachers, so I want to know what they have to say before I sign up for the class. So what if it goes out that you're not checking rate my professor, you got all these bad ratings, and you're questioning why students don't feel this way or why like that? You got to also take that into account, because just like what you say, it does have a consequence. Just like what she says has a consequence. She should not have said it on Twitter. You could have said it in a nice written out piece and probably expressed how you feel, but if you're only saying it in that manner, we can only take what you say. So in this instance, in response to your situation, I think checking rate my professor has a benefit and a negative benefit, because you do get to hear what students honestly have to say that we cannot necessarily
Can I ask you,
express in that.
how many people here go to rate my professor when you think somebody's really good? No, I mean that you rate them. You rate them when they're good? Okay, so it's not something where, because, I mean, does anyone ever call...
That's where you find the good ones.
Yes,
That's
right.
where
Professor has different categories. They talk about how if the teacher it requires a textbook, whether it's like the teacher has a hotness, whether they're cold or whether they're spicy chili like a good teacher. So we look at all those factors.
I'm just thinking, do you ever call Verizon and say, you are doing such a good job?
I call my bank and let
Good time.
I always leave them
Yeah.
like I always give good responses. So it's not, I don't want you guys to think rate my professor is just negative.
Okay.
Students actually go in there and be like, listen,
Good.
if they ask you what grade you received in that class, people can be like, I received a straight up D, but I enjoy this professor. He's very passionate, or
I've seen that a lot.
anything
Like,
about
okay,
it.
let's get
It's
back.
All right, okay.
Okay,
All right. But that's
coming back to
But the basic
topic
point is still that sometimes speaking your truth does have consequences.
Every time.
Okay.
Whether a positive or negative.
All right. Let me.
we
Yeah, I
have
did
another
that.
student here.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yes.
Eight.
Yeah, because we skipped you before. So.
I think in this day and age, especially with social media and the First Amendment rights, everything is so sensitive because everybody is tired of lies and politics, and everybody just wants to see the truth and transparency in things. That's also why social media has the traction that it has continually grow. And so when people try to be transparent and be truthful, they put it out there, and then they get backlash anyway. It's like everybody asking for the truth. You can't take the heat and get out the kitchen. They're asking for the truth, but can't handle the truth when they get it. And so, I mean, that's honestly how I have to say. So anytime there's a debate like this with social media, you're just constantly going to be controversy because everybody's trying to figure out the truth and whether it's right or wrong with amendments and new bills being passed to accommodate certain people that live in these countries, our country, whatever it will be. And so the line between right and wrong, it switches back and forth. It's an unclear line, and with social media, it just gets more and more unclear. And so that's why there's always going to be controversy between the two, especially if the person is black and they make it complicated.
But I think you also have to keep remembering this is a business. I mean, Twitter is a business. The more controversial you are on Twitter, the more people are going to follow you and respond. That's good for Twitter. Twitter advertises. You know, the more clicks an article gets, that's good for Facebook. So there is a real incentive to hype things up and to make things controversial. Because, you know, if you just say there's a new road that's going to be built, and versus this road is going to destroy a gravesite, you know, I mean, that there's just such a difference in terms of you guys all have to be real consumers now. You have to be smart about consuming information. You know, some of us in this room grew up when there were 3 networks, and there was what we called the news business was gatekeepers, and you know they told us what we should think or what we should watch, what we should see. Now we're the gatekeepers.
I don't think we've heard from this gentleman.
I kind of figured out like a weird optimistic pattern with all this. Like I feel like it's a mistake, but also a lesson that can turn into a blessing. Because we can all learn from this situation, like in the sense of what not to do and what to do as a journalist in like a position like with ESPN, Sports Center. You can learn a lesson from this.
So what have you learned?
I learned not to put my personal beliefs on social media if I'm representing a brand like ESPN or just a big brand like that. Because that's still my main income. Can't really mess that up.
Yeah, but what if you, you know, you work for something small now, and then a few years from now you go work on ESPN? You know, you have to be thinking about each of you has a brand, and you've got to be thinking that years from now, how is this going to come back and bite you in the butt?
Let me go.
We've got some people, students who haven't.
Okay, we'll take the students. This is students, yes.
Just to talk about what Gregory said, I feel like
Nice and loud.
if you're gonna, just to talk about what Gregory just said, like I don't remember for anything he said. I feel like you're right. You can learn something from this, but I feel like if you're not, I feel like you shouldn't go to a company if you feel like if they're gonna basically silence you. You feel like you're being silenced in any way. Don't try to compromise with that company. If you feel like that's really not for you, and you have like a strong passion or whatever, and you still want to be a journalist, there are companies that will work with you, like maybe newspapers or something like that. But don't feel like you have to silence yourself to work for a company. I don't ever feel like you should have to do that. Like I understand you should, you know, probably, you know, learn something like knowledge, wisdom, understanding, stuff like that from this whole incident. But at the same time, I feel like she shouldn't have to silence what she says or how she feels because of this company. And I understand you're saying she does work for like a big business and stuff like that, but if that's how you honestly feel, if Trump can do it, he sets the standard in a way. And I feel like if he set that standard, you know, that's the example that he's setting, and I feel like he makes it okay. So now she thinks it's okay, and I feel like in a way, now it is okay. In the age that we live in, I understand everybody's gonna say, well, she works for a company and stuff like that. Okay, but they're asking her for her opinion anyway. And if they're asking you to silence that opinion, then like, what do you really have? Like, then I feel like you should just kind of leave out from that company. What is that company saying then?
But her job at 6 o'clock doesn't call for an opinion.
I mean,
right.
Exactly, she's on her personal time, and they're still saying that she needs to, you know, she started to apologize for that company's image. They're still in a way trying to silence her, and I just don't like that.
And I think one of the challenges that everyone has to make, I mean, again, in their core, how you represent what is your truth? If communicating your truth is the most important thing for you, then you've got to make a decision about how you want to make a living. And so it's not about, and again, they're all, you know, rules and regulations, right? Stop signs. My truth is speeding. That doesn't mean I can go through the stop sign. But we have to be aware of that and again, make and think about these choices. What's so compelling and scary about and powerful about social media is that in our world now is that people are more likely to rely on the opinions of someone they know who they engage with on social media as individuals than in institutions. So I heard the great philosopher Sean Combs say this a few years ago on Larry King. People don't care about organizations and institutions. They care about individuals. And this is why Jemele Hill and so many others, this is why Donald Trump, in my opinion, is president. This is one of the reasons he's president. Because people are interested in individuals, not structures, not institutions. As professionals, though, we all have to, and humans, we all have to make the choice about where we need to have our space. Because even if you worked for what you think is the most righteous organization, the Black Lives Matter movement, for example, NAACP, NASA, I mean, if you think of something that you think, this is where I really need to be, you're still going to find yourself in conflict at some point with a decision that an organization makes. Because an organization has to do what an organization has to do, but you've got to decide that. And you've got to respect that, again, going into it and realize, okay, my personal stuff. And in fact, sometimes you see people in social media, on Twitter in particular, who say, this is my personal account. This is my account as spokesperson for, Annie Casey Foundation, where this is me, Dana. I can't spout off about, the potholes in Baltimore County. I have to talk about kids and families because that's what, you know what I mean? So people make that choice as well.
Do you think there is a line? I mean, do you think that you can say that my thoughts and opinions don't represent the organization and really get away with that?
I see these two things, I don't think so. Which is why, as I say, I do a lot of editing. And sometimes, I say things and I'm thinking, okay, I'm looking for a job. When someone sees this, what are they going to think about this? I'll either pull it down or I'll say no, because part of who I am is I'm a rabble-rouser, I'm a mentor, I'm a strategist. These are things. This is who I am. Right. So this is me. And if that's not working with you, then you can keep moving. Right. But I always try to. I'm always thinking thoughtfully. I'm not. I'm always thinking. I mean, I can't. My students know I can't help it. That's how I roll, and I want all of us to think more strategically, to be thinking more as we're going through all these and making all these decisions, right? And even even having the opinions that we have about this is right, this is wrong, this was smart, this was appropriate.
But don't you also think that you and I can weather the storm? These guys are all starting. I mean, we have careers.
But still,
they should be much more careful.
Well, I think we all need to be careful because I have another adventure in me, and I am always, and I'm also trying to. I have a brand of my own that I'm trying to represent, which is not ignorance, which is knowledge, which is being strategic, and so I think about all that. Even when I'm, being quirky, silly, or profane in social media.
Okay. We have, the pizza is here.
And don't want to get too cold.
Right, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take moderator's privilege here. We've got Professor Wheeler, Janine, Ivy, Mr. Rogers, and Dr. Carveth. We'll take those 5, and when they're done, we'll eat pizza.
Well, can we keep talking and eat
pizza? Oh, sure, we can. But I just want, here's the thing. I know some folks are going to have a class at 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
So
I want to try to, as they say, wrap it up. Not wrap it up, but, So let me start with Professor Wheeler.
Oh, I was just I had so many comments to make, but I'll just narrow it down to, I have a friend who's an executive who hires people for other people. She's a headhunter. And what she said is when she went and looked at this person's Facebook page, she couldn't even recommend that person for the position. So you are being hired. You might say something that you think you're going to be hired based on what you said socially, no matter whether you like it or not. And also, it's easy now to take your stand, but when you got 5 kids and mouths to feed, you're going to think, I'm not going to say this because I got to pay my mortgage and my car note and everything else. So this is a good time to take a stand if you're going to take a stand. But also, if you're Jemele Hill, once you get real comfortable with that money coming in, that makes a difference. I mean, she probably won't hurt ESPN's brand that much, if at all, because they know their audience. It's just like Bill Riley could say whatever he wanted to say on Fox. But then when he started molesting women, that took it too far. But anyway, they won't.
Yeah, don't do that. We all agree. Don't do that.
Yeah, molesting is bad.
Yeah, molesting is bad.
Yeah.
So, but just think about what you're saying, what you're doing, and also the fact that once you have a stake in something, it makes it real different. You think differently about what you say and the rules and how they apply.
Okay. Let me go over there first, and we'll give you guys. No, we'll give you to the last words. Okay.
Just before I preface this, I love all people.
Nice.
But I think that sometimes we, as the United States, we forget our history, and then as African Americans, we forget our history. Huey P. Newton said that you can't expect a white media to portray a correct or positive narrative for African Americans. So, advising segue. So that's why we need you guys to go into the field and be these journalists, to be these public relations specialists, communication specialists, and these producers, because you narrate what's going on. So America is really good at narrating or sideswiping what goes on. Everybody talks about Floyd Mayweather and his domestic violence, but when that boxing ring comes on, either somebody's streaming it through Fire Stick or they pay for the pay-per-view. So it's the narrative that they control. So that's why we need you guys to go into the field to shift the narration. I think put it in that perspective.
I agree 1,000%.
Good one.
One of the other aspects of this story is the fact that in the spring, Linda Cohn was asked a question about.
She's a host on ESPN.
Yeah.
Sports Center anchor, yeah.
And has been there for done
Ever.
5,000 shows.
25, yeah.
Yeah. She had been asked a question on a radio show about the declining viewership at ESPN and whether or not it was related to the political content on ESPN. She said she didn't know how much, but she said you'd have to be foolish not to think that it didn't. She got suspended for a weekend for making that comment. There was no announcement about that. It was kept very quiet until this thing about Jemele Hill came up and whether or not ESPN was going to punish her. And one of the things that ESPN is now caught in is whether or not there was a double standard, because one incident by Cohn, one incident about Hill, one gets suspended for a weekend, the other one basically gets a slap on the wrist. And so I was wondering if there's any response to that.
Well, don't you think, talking about value? I mean, I hate to bring it down to that, but didn't somebody make a decision about who's more valuable to the company, in a certain sense?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's right or wrong, I mean, don't you think that if that's, again, you talk about Jemele Hill, if Linda Cohn is the 6:00 p.m. anchor every night, maybe they don't suspend her.
Well, if I'm looking at SE6 too,
right?
The audience for 6:00 has declined in white viewership, but it has almost been replaced by African American millennials. And the difference is that African American millennials are more engaged in terms of their viewership than the older white audience that ended up drifting off. And so from ESPN's point of view, they're looking at, we've got a much more active viewership. They tweet about us and they're much more involved than what we ended up losing. So if you're talking about clout, you've got an older white woman who's very, very good at her job, but is she bringing in as much as Jemele Hill is? Yeah, it is a business decision, but it also, I mean, on the face of it, does look a little double standard-ish. So.
Okay. Janine, let me take Janine and then Ivy, I'll take you last.
Speaking of what Zion said,
Zion.
That's what I said.
Zion from Philly.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
My bad. I think one thing that we also have to acknowledge, and I'm speaking from a millennial, I'm only 21 years old. The generation that raised us didn't prepare us necessarily for as strong of a double consciousness as what we have to think about now. As millennials, we're so into, I gotta have my opinion out there. You've gotta hear what I have to say. And we're not, what you're saying is being, present about all sides of it. You're not thinking of it as if, all right, if I put this on Twitter, when I when millennials, sometimes when they tweet, they don't think about how many retweets, who's going to see it, if it's going to be screenshotted, whether it's going to save. And that's something we all need to start thinking about, because to be truthful, we're going to get into a career where they're going to do things that we do not like. But just because, like the example she gave, there are people that have families to feed, I have school debt loans to pay off, so it just might not be worth my fight to always stand up and say something. However, how she used her platform, using Twitter, was not the right way. She probably could have done it differently, but I just question, had she had done it differently, would we be talking about it? Honestly, like, I do question, like, had she had said something in the privacy of our home, y'all would have never known about it. You know what I'm saying? It's just the simple fact that she put it on Twitter, in the captions, in the specific word phrasing that she did is what makes it an issue. We're not saying to not have an opinion. It's just about, you have to be smart on when your opinion can be used, how you can use it to benefit your career. Because in this instance, just like you said, he might have found a whole new replacement audience and been like, all right, forget about what controversy she was bringing. Now we're getting a whole new generation of millennials, which is honestly the future. We are moving into the future of millennials. We are the future. We are the people that are going to be taking, to be honest, your position. So we need to learn how to use our resources responsibly, because I would have never put that on Twitter. I could say how I feel about a person behind closed doors, but once you put it on the internet, or even if someone privately recorded her and it just got out there, you just have to deal with those consequences. You know, you have to understand the fact that if you sign up for ESPN, if you say it on Twitter, it just might be saved. So you just got, as millennials, that's just something we all just got to think about. We just got to think about we got to think 4 steps ahead. Not 2, not 3, 4.
Consequences.
They're trying to hold us back. So you just got to think more. That's why I'm saying in this instance, she was wrong for the whole Twitter thing, period.
Okay, Ivy?
What I have to say somewhat piggybacks off of what she stated. The Miss America pageant it just took place not too long ago in Miss Texas. I have 2 tweets specifically that I want to touch on. In 20 seconds, Miss Texas showed more bravery and honesty than an entire year of spineless White House yes men. And then another hashtag was hashtag Miss Texas speaking up on white supremacy and how Trump didn't speak up on it fast enough with a clapping emoji. So
who's that from?
I just search hashtag Miss Texas.
Okay.
What did she say? Miss
There's
Texas.
a video clip if you want me to play it out loud so you can hear exactly what she said.
Well, tell you what, why don't let me see if I can find it.
Yeah, Miss Texas was asked if Trump handled Charlottesville badly.
Oh, I don't know that.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
And this is at the Miss America pageant.
So of course she won't say
how big, how are we praising the woman who is representing the entire state of Texas and is on a platform in front of the entire nation for saying what she said, which is basically somewhat of the same thing that Jemele Hill said.
Well,
so why is there
Jemele Hill isn't I'm sorry, Miss America isn't a journalist.
Right. But she
is funded by.
And she's not paid by the state of Texas. And she was paid by the state of Texas.
We don't know that.
No, she's not paid by the state.
state.
Miss America is not.
Contestant is not a
These are
job.
the beauty queens who go into this thing. They're not. The fact that she said anything intelligent is great. I give it for them. Because usually the answers are
No, a
not.
lot of them
wanna go there.
They normally have high GPAs. They're normally in college. They're normally college graduates, and they're normally paying for school.
My point is, they don't represent. They're not paid by the state of Texas.
Apples and oranges.
And
It's
remember,
apples and oranges.
okay, hold on.
I feel like you know.
Jemele Hill is a journalist, folks. That's why we're even having this conversation.
Exactly.
Right. Are we? Right.
I'm sorry, Ivy?
yes.
And I appreciate your point, because there was some conversation on Twitter about people were making, and again, you all were involved in these conversations because you're intelligent communication students, but people who aren't studying and smart like you all were making these comparisons between a journalist and Miss Texas.
Okay.
To the point of, and I'm not going to say where I've even heard this, so we all are clear. Everyone has the right to say what they want to say. Miss Texas, Jemele Hill, we all have the right to say what we want to say. It's about appropriateness. It's about is it the smart thing to do given the circumstances? And as journalists, you have to ask a different set of questions than the average bear. And as public relations people, you have a set of questions that you have to ask that are different than the questions that journalists have to ask. Okay. The point is, everyone, ask the questions. Don't go to, this is my right, this is wrong, if you haven't asked the right questions.
Or assume.
Or assume.
Okay. Penelope, what you have?
I just wanted to make the point that it kind of piggybacks off of what Jemele said also, and also ties into what Professor Shelley said earlier.
To Miss Tex.
I'm sorry.
But,
Go ahead.
My question is, you made the point that people pay more attention to individuals rather than institutions.
Trust individuals more than,
Okay, so Jemele Hill used her high profile to bring awareness to an issue that no one in this room can deny. So my question is, would we have rather her not say anything? That's my biggest question. Was she wrong? Should we shun her? Especially from the black community, was that wrong? That she brought awareness to that?
Well, I think Alicia made the comment earlier that, again, we agree she wasn't. No, it's not wrong to call out white supremacy, but if you decide and if you think this through. Again, let's say Jemele Hill called me the head of corporate communications for ESPN. I'm pissed. I want to comment on Donald Trump. He's a lowdown. I want to say something. Here's what my recommendation is, Jemele. Let's work on, or you and your team work on an op-ed about white supremacy, football owners, football players, connected to our business. Connected to our business. You're a journalist. Write your opinion. Do a column on this. She could have talked about it, addressed it. The president is making comments aligning himself with white supremacists. And she could have connected that to the business at hand. Again, this is me as a communications person advising her. That would have been, that way the message could have come out, and I think the consequences would have been different.
In fact, to that point, seven NFL owners gave at least $1 million to Trump's campaign. So the intelligence piece might have been nail those seven, quote unquote, nail those seven owners. Ask them, your brand, you're associating your brand and the NFL by extension with a man who's been tied to white supremacy. Maybe that's the way to do. You don't always have to hit people over the head with a sledgehammer to make your point. Sometimes being subtle. Subtlety works too.
It's a sport that is dominated by African Americans.
Yes, yeah. So here's the piece, and after I play the clip, there's another piece of irony in this as well. So,
question will go to Miss Texas. Margana Wood, come on over.
For questions?
Yes.
Okay. Make it to the next round.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Whoever doesn't get a question doesn't.
All right.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Margana. Please choose a judge. Your question will come from Just Cagle.
Last month, a demonstration of neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and the KKK
Editor of InStyle magazine, you all should know him.
in Charlottesville, Virginia, turned violent and a counter-protester was killed. The president said there was...
Yes.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing. Keep your own. I have a hotspot. I keep my own hotspot on me at all times.
Heating here, and it's 20 at 1.
Yeah.
All right. Unfortunately, we couldn't finish the clip, but I did want to make the point. There was an African American woman on the stage with the host named Sage Steele. Sage Steele she works at ESPN, and she was suspended, was she not? Suspended and back.
Why?
For making comments that
the airport and the protesting, and it made her late or something.
Yeah, it was unnecessary.
Yeah. Now the interesting thing is, Sage Steele is a conservative. She's a conservative black woman a woman that works at ESPN. We talk about double standards. She got she got suspended and kicked off of the NBA show. And she was the host of the NBA, of the network's NBA coverage. She's taken off of that, removed from that, in part, people believe, because she has conservative views that run counter to what the NBA, the NBA is a very liberal league, relatively speaking. So, all right. So I see folks looking at watches and clocks. It's 12:40. The piece is there. Please, for Kobe. Yes.
I want to put in a plug for my column that just went up on the Baltimore Sun website.
Okay.
It's about another controversy, the whole Francis Scott Key and Confederate monuments and all of that. And it talks about history.
Okay. Help me thank our panelists. Yay! And enjoy the pizza. Thank you all for coming.
Very good job, Professor Shelley. And thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.
So you're going out to the University of Arkansas.
Yeah, on a visiting.
Great. I have a friend out there.